Well, welcome to another edition of Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles. Topical day today. Something hit me in the news, Terry,
Mm,
that I want to share with you. It's sort of an affirmation, but also it's something powerful from Nick Saban. Simon Sinek was interviewing a businessman. He said he brought his business up almost tenfold. And he said, "What did you do that?" And he said, "I interviewed Nick Saban." And since football's in the air right now, I thought I'd bring up this affirmation. And he
sure.
interviewed Nick Saban, and Nick Saban said, "You're playing the wrong game. You're playing the results game. You're playing the end game.
Mhm.
Here's what you have to do. You have to play every play to perfection." And
Mhm.
he said, "Don't look at the scoreboard. Don't look at the fans. Just play to perfection." And he said he went back to his company and started doing that. And every day they played to perfection. And they talk about starting the day. How do you get an A at the end of the day?
Mhm.
I thought that was pretty powerful. So I'm sharing that with you. Football, I
It
guess, is
is.
in the air. Everything I've been doing so far has been related to football. And we just recently had an incident in football last night with the Miami Dolphins and the Bills
Yes.
with a player, and we had concussions. Now, that's been a big topic of yours, correct, Terry?
It has since 2012, actually, when the first lawsuits were reported in the NFL. That's when it really became more aware.
So tell me a little bit about your involvement in concussions. I have a daughter whose son wants to play football. He's playing flag football now,
Mhm.
but she said, "I don't want you to play football because it's dangerous," but he wants to play. Maybe you could fill us in a little bit. If we're a parent, we have young kids, or we have kids who are going off to college who like to play football. Tell us about the ramifications of concussions.
Yeah, well, first of all, to your daughter and her son wanting to play football, I mean, my wife and I, we don't allow Braden to play. He's been to a football camp without pads just for fitness, and he loves football. He was throwing a football when he was in a diaper,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Tua, like bullets. And I had football guys that would come over and hang out at the house, and they're watching him throw, and he couldn't even talk. And I didn't show him how to throw it. He just knew how to pick the ball up and throw a spiral. So he loves football, and we're like, no. So he plays tennis. So
And football is one of the most popular sports in the U.S. today.
it is. Well, the NFL is too. That's why they settled the lawsuit we'll talk about in a few minutes in 2015 on this concussion management protocol that got him off the hook. But they actually admitted no fault. They just said we'll pay out money, but we were not at fault because players knew what they were getting into. You know what I mean? So they found a way to legally not be liable, but they agreed for a settlement, and that's what they did. So that's a story for a
Hmm.
moment. But as far as concussions, there's 1.7 million to 3 million reported sport injury concussions that could be sport and recreation. It could be bike riding, but there's 1.7 to 3 million reported every year concussions. Now, there's different grades of concussions. And the more concussions you have, the worse it gets. This is what Tua Tagovailoa is going through now, quarterback of the
This is
Dolphins.
this is his fourth, correct?
It's 5 total. He had 1 in
Five.
college and 4 in the
Okay.
NFL.
Hmm.
So at some point, you have to get with your medical team and your family and say, what am I doing? He's concussion prone. There's some athletes that play sport and they never have a concussion that they know of. But there's a lot of mini concussions that take place. Thousands and thousands of hit. Actually, one of the other really dangerous sports is soccer because they do so many headers. Those are many hits to the head. If you've ever headed a soccer ball, I mean, you feel it for a moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it hits. It's a basketball, but you're not heading from a basketball. But in soccer, it's a very familiar move, as you know. So the concussion piece is tough. Now, here's the other stat: out of that 1.7 to 3 million concussions reported through sport and recreation, 300,000 of them are from football, and that's mostly probably out of the NFL. That's youth,
Yeah.
high school, college. 300,000 a year reported. 5 out of 10, one half of all the concussions that are suffered are not reported. So really the number could be 600,000 in football. It could
So,
be
t- so
three to
tell
6 million.
so tell me, they are working on the helmets to get them better. No matter
Yes,
how they protect the head, you're still prone to a concussion, correct?
that is
Depending on
correct.
how you get hit.
That is correct. And the other misnomer is most concussions in the NFL were not like Tua's last night. It's not a helmet hitting a body or a helmet hitting another helmet. That does occur. But the most concussions he had 3 of them last year, were from his head hitting the ground. Because they have a tackling move where these big linemen come in that are 300-pound gorillas, and they hit you with force, and then they flip you like an alligator does. It's an
Yes. Yep.
alligator move. So they flip you and they throw you. And when your body hits your head, back of your helmet hits the ground. That's where he suffered all of his concussions until last night. They were ground impact. And so it's just an impact on the brain. And it you could see what happened if you were watching the game last night. I mean, he was convulsing. His arms are frailing, his legs are jerking. I mean, you don't have to say, what if he had a concussion? He had a concussion.
So that's the telltale signs when you're shaking like that.
That's the worst scenarios. You can just get up and feel nauseated and dizzy, and they'll put you in concussion protocol. So it doesn't have to be that violent, but his hit last night was so violent that it could have broken his neck. If you watch the play, he was running the ball as a quarterback, and he ran into a defensive player, and it wasn't the defensive player's fault. They're just trying to tackle a moving object coming at him. So Tua ducked his head to try to, avoid him and go around him, and it hit him right in the chest plate. And when it did, his helmet went between his arm and his head, and you can see his neck just bend and snap. And then he
Mm.
just hits the ground, and it's kind of like lights out at that point. It is literally for a few moments.
So when you get off the field, what do they do to help you? I mean, can you get your bearings back?
Yeah, there's not a lot you can. I mean, they do the old school stuff. They, smelling sauce if they need it, to kind of jolt you. But then they'll just check your vitals and make sure, like any accident, because there could be nothing physical necessarily that you see. His head's protected with a helmet. It's inside the brain that was injured, so there's not a lot you can do. You can do some icing, on the head. The back of the neck is a big thing that you can ice the
Yeah,
back of the
yeah.
neck. That'll help the swelling. Because let me define this just real quick. So a concussion is when the brain moves inside of the skull. There's a movement that takes place, and it can be very slight. You may not even be able to see it if we record it inside the brain, but it does move, and that moving causes an injury. And that injury, like any injury, has to swell because it draws blood there. So it could be a bruise. If you've ever, and we all have, you scraped your arm, your leg, you get a bruising. And from that bruising, what happens is, you get swelling. So when the brain swells, it causes all kinds of problems: forgetfulness, headaches, nausea, attention deficit kind of things, a short-term memory. Like I've had two, and this is what put me
You
on
had
the
it.
journey.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
playing ball, of course. And the last one I had, I was 35 years old playing softball, and I stopped at that point playing organized softball because I just said it's not worth it. I mean, I have fun, I love it, I played ball my whole life, but really. And I remember when it was 94. I just finished my PhD program and graduated. So it was like in the fall of 94 in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan area. And I ran through first base. The second baseman, which is not supposed to happen, ran around to back up the first baseman and ran in my line. I didn't see him because I'm running full speed with my head down. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the dirt with blood on my face and the dirt in front of me. I didn't know. I thought I was playing football without a helmet. I didn't know where I was. And they got me up, and I was still alert, but I didn't really know what happened. And what happened was I hit him, and he hit me so hard, his head hit my chin. I had 13 stitches under my chin. I went to the hospital. They stitched me up. But they go in, they check me in, they go, "What happened?" And somebody took me, and I couldn't answer them. I'm like, I don't know. And then I looked down and I had my softball shirt on, and she goes, "You were playing ball?" I go, "Yeah." So if you told me and I could affirm it visually, I would say, yeah. That went on. I had to cancel a gig at Pfizer the next day getting on a plane because I couldn't get on a plane. So it took me like 3-4 days to get unfoggy. I mean, it
Wow.
was scary, but here was the scariest thought, Chet. You can imagine. I just graduated my PhD, and all I could think of on the ride to the hospital was I just forgot everything I spent my whole life learning.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
It was like frightening. But fortunately, you lose your short-term memory at first, not your long-term. So these are all these signs and symptoms that can happen. So it's a loaded question, but there's a lot of frequent things that can take place that become very scary.
Is there anything that the NFL actually can do that they haven't done that would help protect them even better?
Well, I think the NFL has done a good job trying to protect. They've changed the helmets multiple times. I was a part of some of that technology back to 2015. They've done things like drills to tackle and block differently. They're teaching young kids how to interact and collide. Listen, when you sign up for football, it's a collision sport. It's like getting in a car. You got to wear a seatbelt because you could have an accident and kill yourself. I mean, football is a collision sport.
Yeah. Yep.
Basketball, hockey, collision sport. Basketball, not so much. Baseball, not so much. Soccer, kind of. Football, absolutely collision. It's trucks hitting each other head on at full speed. So you got to know going in, it's a dangerous sport. But the league, the NFL league, I think has done a good job in monitoring this over the years and trying to make it safer. But at the end of the day, it's still a collision sport.
Is it safer if they change the way the game is played, or is it safer that they could pad the
It
helmets
is.
even better?
They're doing both. If you noticed, if you haven't already, the season just started last weekend,
Yes.
week and a
Yeah.
half ago. On the kickoffs, they've now moved the lines where you don't run
Yes.
full speed. That's for concussion. That's for impact. So the NFL, like I said, has done a good job, I think, trying to say, how do we keep the sport viable? It's a huge business, huge. And that's how these players get hundreds of millions of dollars in contract. Listen, somebody pays for that. Advertisers and companies who advertise and team owners who have invested their billions. It's a big, big business. So they don't want it to go away. And I don't want it to go away. I love football. I'm a Miami fan. I've had season tickets for years, but I'm not on the field. I'm not taking the hits. I'm in the stands. So I'm not at risk. I'm paying their salaries by paying season tickets. You know what I mean? So I do want to say this. How I got into this really at this level started in about 2012, but in 2014, going into 15, at the time I was working very closely with IndyCar on concussion management.
Never
And
thought about that for IndyCar. Yeah.
yeah, well, they're hitting at 100+ GLOs, at a wall, and they've done well in racing. They use Hans devices now, which locks the helmet to the seat, so your head can't move forward. It moves from side to side a little like this, but you can't do this because that'll snap your neck. It's how Dale Earnhardt Sr. died. No Hans device. He wouldn't wear one. And when he hit the wall at like 60 miles an hour under caution, it wasn't that big of a hit. I think it was 2000. And when he hit the wall, it was such an impact that his neck snapped and killed him instantly. So they've done IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One done a really good job with Hans device, and Hans is the one that created it because of a neck injury. So it protects your neck. However,
We should have them in regular cars, I guess, too.
well, we have seat belts that help and airbags, but then the airbag does some of that. The airbag is designed when your head goes forward that it stops you from going all the way to snap your vertebrae. So it does help, but it's pretty violent. If you've been hit by a bag, I mean, it could black your eyes. I mean, it's pretty violent, but it will save your life in some cases. So I think we've done really decently in the motorsport world that translates into cars and trucks on the
Sure.
streets.
Sure. Yeah.
But what was interesting was, here's a story. There was a driver that drove for Penske at the time. His name is Will Power. He's still driving in the series. And he had just a minor incident, hit the wall. Not a big deal. These guys hit the wall, jump in a backup car and go again. Unless they get out and they're dizzy, they have vision issues, and then they pull them out, and that you got to put a backup driver in because now you got going concussion protocol. So he jumped out of the car. He had some nausea, felt a little dizzy, and they're like, but we knew because we had a biometric system in the helmet, in the ear, and we could tell the G load. And his G load impact was less than 50. So at 50 G loads, 50 times your body weight is a concussion. Over that is it's even more of a concussion, right? So his was under a 50 G load impact. So as I'm working with the chief engineer for IndyCar, they checked with him, and I'm with him there, and they said, listen, the G load impact did not qualify for a concussion, but he has the symptoms of concussion. So they still had to pull him out of the car. They sent him to my IU, well, because where he was then, he was here at we were in St. Pete, and they flew him to Miami, and he went to Miami University to be checked out. They checked out everything. He had no concussion. There was no movement that they could see that took place in the brain. But what they did discover is he had some fluid in his ears, like an ear infection that was minor that
Sure.
caused the same symptoms. So it was like a vertigo. It had nothing to do with the impact. Now, see, we'd have never known that unless we were measuring the impact of the brain inside of the helmet. I took that same technology to the NFL. They looked at it and said, that's very interesting. I said, look, we can answer this. We've been doing this for years in IndyCar, years. I've got reams of data. And they said, interesting. We made multiple rounds with NFL at the top level. And then the NFL Players Union had to sign off on it, their union. And they nixed it because they were afraid that it would impact the player's ability to sign a new contract.
Explain that a little bit deeper.
Well, the players union, like any union, is protecting the player, which is their job, and I get it. They're representing the players. The NFL is representing the league. So it's not that the NFL or any organization, even IndyCar, NASCAR, it's not that they don't care about the drivers or the players, but their fiduciary responsibility is toward the team and being profitable.
Right. Yeah, I get
the
that.
league, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
players union strictly protect other players, which they should. But that's what it came down to is we don't want that on record. Okay, now see, but they still have it on record. See, they really didn't think it through back in 2015. So Tua just had another concussion last night. The whole world knows he had a concussion.
Correct.
We know he's had 5 now in his career, 1 in college and 4 in the NFL, including last night. What team would hire him? We just paid him a big contract before the season started, and I don't know what his clauses are because I'm not involved in these guys' contracts, but I know there are clauses and injuries a part of that. I don't know what that means in payout, guaranteed money, but it becomes a big business decision. But here's the kicker, and I'll get off my horse for a minute. In 2015, when this was going on and they were saying yes, 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 and then no, 6 months later or less, probably 4 months later in 2015, the NFL settled that lawsuit that started in 2012 and continued on. And it was going to pay out over $1 billion to players that have had concussions and their families and so forth. And then they gave $100 million to Harvard University for research, to start researching.
Mm.
And I'm going, we've been doing this for years. Guess how many people contacted me or IndyCar or our chief engineering staff?
No one.
No one. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And you still have that technology available, correct?
Yeah, it's actually increased. We've actually taken it now where it's adaptable in the ear canal, and it's sound based. We don't monitor your heart rate anymore. We listen to your blood flow through your veins in your head.
And so if somebody gets a concussion, what does that tell you? What does your device tell specifically?
The G load impact. So it guarantees a concussion. That's all it can do is monitor. It's like a cusp you put on. It can't prevent it. It's just inside of the brain. You put it in your ear. It's an earbud. You put it in your ear. We all use earbuds, right?
Yeah,
so when you put an earbud in, it's closest to the center part of your brain. And the hypothalamus and the spinal cord, blood flow. So it's the most adaptable place to put an earbud is in your ear. Like with an infant, there's basically like 3 areas that we can monitor their condition with a thermometer, right? It's by mouth, which isn't very good because they could bite it. It's under their arm, which is okay, but the best place is in the rectum because you're inside the body. Okay, so either the mouth, under the arm, or the rectum for a baby. So in our day, we'd rather stay in the ear.
Yes, I remember that.
So we put it in the ear because I'm still in the body. You can't put it in your mouth. I don't want to sit on it and drive a race car. So we stay in the ear. So all fun aside, that's how we sold it. It's like, guys, listen, this could be worse, but we're just going to put it in your ear. You wear an ear canal anyway. You don't even know it's in there. It's a 3 millimeter chip. They don't even know.
Well, the final question I have for you is, 2A, should he just get out of football now, or he's going to kill himself?
Well, this is a conversation that and I've been through this with other players. He's going to have a conversation that with his family, his medical team, his financial advisors, his lawyers. I mean, he needs to have a real serious conversation. He's probably out for the season. I would assume. If not, he's going to miss quite a few games.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
this is the last thing. So I don't know. That's a decision the Tua camp will have to make a decision on. All the people around him that care about him and love him. I don't know. I've known athletes that's had to make that decision, and it's not easy. I mean, there's been a litany. We could do a whole show if you just Google how many NFL famous quarterbacks and even players, not even quarterbacks, players have suffered concussion and even killed themselves because of it. Junior Seau, that used to play for the Chargers, he shot himself in the chest. So he wrote out I didn't shoot myself in the head because I want you to study my concussed brain and help other players. I mean, and if you didn't see the movie Concussion that came out a few years ago, Will Smith plays the doctor that actually went through this process and got the NFL to do what it is they do. And he actually got them to pay out that amount of money. But he was the chief doctor. So the movie is called Concussion. I'm not promoting the movie, but it's as case of this, I am, because I've seen it multiple times, and it's a really interesting thing. They have a line in there. I'll leave you with this. I know we're probably running out of time. I'm letting you monitor that. I'm just talking. So I apologize for dominating the conversation, but you're asking me questions.
Yeah, you know better than I do.
There's a line in there that always stuck with me, and we studied this in school and after school doing post-concussion research. That it was so interesting because, and I have one of these birds in my yard. It's a red-headed woodpecker, and they're pretty annoying. I can hear him from down the block, but he'll sit right out in front of my office right here in this tree, and he pecks away at the tree, and it sounds like, you can hear it when I'm zooming. I mean, I'm like, can you leave, man? Like, go next door. Um,
He likes your
but
tree.
it's interesting that a woodpecker, and also interesting, they will peck on power line poles, even metal ones. And what they're doing is they hear the buzzing of the electricity going through the pole, and they think it's bugs. So they're getting in there to eat the bugs, and there's no bugs. It's electricity flowing, but it still makes a humming sound. But here's the most interesting thing. We're not designed as human beings for concussions. He is. The red-headed woodpecker is designed by God for concussions. All they do is hit their head all day. Bam, 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 all day. But here's the difference. They have an internal helmet. When they go to peck, their tongue goes around their brain to protect it, and then they peck. And when they're done pecking, they get a bird, their tongue comes back down, and they swallow the food.
Did not know that. Did not know that.
Powerful internal concussion management that is not possible for human beings. So we do the best we can. We put a helmet on, but it's already too late because the brain still moves inside the skull. Their tongue keeps it from moving.
Oh, I see, because the tongue is in the head.
Yeah, it's in the head. It goes up in there in a canal, and he pecks away and lives his life. Never had one concussion. Amazing, right?
Well, this is fascinating conversation. I'm definitely going to check out the movie Concussion because I've never seen it.
It's really good. And Will Smith did a fabulous job. It's a true story. Yeah, it's definitely worth watching. You would really enjoy it.
Very topical conversation, Terry. Thanks for the insight. I appreciate
Welcome.
everything. And thanks for another edition of Influence Today. Terry, how they get in touch with you if they want to talk more about this and they want to get deeper into this conversation?
Just terrylyles.com. I mean, it's pretty simple. TerryLyles.com. It's right here. They can
It's
get to
right
me there.
behind you. You're
It's
right.
right behind me. It's there for a reason because I say it over and over and over and over again. So I just put it up so people can like just look up and see it. So yeah, terrylyles.com. I have a new book coming out. We're going to do another podcast on that. It's called Becoming Invaluable. We have a whole training protocol. And you can also go to becominginvaluable.com.
Well,
And
that's good.
that's where my new book is. We have a whole mastery class that I haven't even told you about yet. We just launched it not long ago. And it's I don't know how many pages it ended up being. It's a workbook, but it covers all 9 chapters, and it's a breakout workbook with intentionality and accountability, and it takes you through every chapter of the book. So we're really, and the audio book is also available as a package. So we have the book, the audio book, and the mastery class offered on there in 3 different programs.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate that. And if you
Welcome.
like the show, please give us some stars and also share with your friends and tell us about it. Thanks, Terry. I appreciate the feedback today. Very topical information. And
Yeah,
thanks
thank
for
you.
listening to Influence Today.